All right, now let's turn our attention to the four main file formats that you use to save images from Photoshop, starting with the most essential of them all, which is the native PSD format. Now, this image, as you can see, contains a bunch of layers, and anytime you're working with layers inside Photoshop, you want to save at least one copy of the file so you've got everything you need as a native PSD document. Now, when you first open this file, if you're working along with me, you probably got a missing fonts warning, in which case just go ahead and click on the Don't Resolve button, because if you scroll up the list here, you can see that the one and only editable type layer is actually turned off. So it's not even visible at the moment. Let's say what I want to do is get rid of all the hidden layers inside the image so I don't get that font warning again. In that case, I would click on the flyout menu icon in the upper right corner of the Layers panel and choose Delete Hidden Layers to get rid of them. And then, in response to the alert message, I'll click on a Yes button in order to make those layers go away. Now you can see that I have an asterisk outside my parentheses, which tells me that I have unsaved changes, which means that I could update my existing file by going to the File menu and choosing the Save command, or you have that standard keyboard shortcut of Control-S or Command-S on the Mac, or if you wanted to save an independent copy, then you would choose Save As, which has a slightly different keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-S or Command-Shift-S on the Mac. But before you do, I want you to visit a preference setting. And to get to it, go to the Edit menu here on the PC, that's the Photoshop menu on the Mac, and drop down to the Preferences command, and then go ahead and choose File Handling, which will bring up that same panel of options that we saw in the previous movie. Notice this guy right here, Maximize PSD and PSB file compatibility. By default, it's set to always. You at least want to set it to ask. This is very important, and I'll explain why in a moment, but go ahead and change it to ask and then click OK. Now, I want you to go to the File menu and choose the Save As command so that we can save this file under a different name. And I've actually already done it in advance, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on this file called MDNA Shape Layer. And you want to make sure that your file format, by the way, is set to the native Photoshop format, which is the same as .psd. Now you want to make sure that all of the checkboxes except as a copy are turned on. Now, every so often I run into some weirdness where the alpha channels checkbox gets turned off. Now, we haven't really discussed alpha channels, and we won't for a while, but the short version of the story is that they're masks that are stored in the channels panel. But if you create one, you most certainly don't want to lose it. And so what's going to happen if this gets turned off is you'll see as a copy get turned on. You do not want that. Anytime you're saving a native PSD file, if you see as a copy turned on, that's a danger sign. Go ahead and turn it off, and that will turn back on alpha channels and layers and notes and spot colors if they're available. Then go ahead and click the Save button. And in my case, I'll get an alert message asking me if I want to replace the existing file. I do, so I'll click on the Yes button, after which point I will get this alert message right here, which is asking me if I want to maximize the compatibility of this file. This setting has nothing whatsoever to do with Photoshop. Photoshop is perfectly capable of reading its own files, whether this checkbox is turned off or not. It's all about sharing your PSD files with other applications, most notably Lightroom. So if you're using Lightroom to organize your files, or Premiere, Adobe Premiere, the video editing application. It needs maximize compatibility turned on as well, and other non-Adobe applications do too. However, the problem with this checkbox is when it's turned on, it goes ahead and saves a flattened version of the composite image along with the files so that programs that can't read layers can read that flat image file. Under no circumstance will they be able to access the layers, by the way. And that means that your file size is going to grow significantly. In a case of this image, check out these values down here in the lower left corner of the image window. The first value indicates the size of the image if it were a flat file. The second value represents the size of the image with layers. Now, the fact is, these are both file sizes in RAM, and they don't take into account things like smart objects, which is why the file actually takes up 32 megs if we turn maximize compatibility off. If we turn it on, it grows to more than 44 megs. And a good rule of thumb is that you're adding both of these two values together because you're saving a flat version of the file along with a layered version. So unless you're using Lightroom to manage your files or you're working with Premiere, then I would turn maximize compatibility off, because just about every other Adobe application can read Photoshop layers, including Adobe Bridge, as well as Illustrator and InDesign. And so you don't need this checkbox turned on for any of those applications. And in fact, ever since I've been providing sample files to people, I have turned this checkbox off with no adverse effects. And as a result, I'm sure I've saved a lot of people a lot of downloading time, and I've saved a couple of 3 hard drives as well. So anyway, that's my recommendation. And now I'll go ahead and click OK in order to save that file. And just one more thing. Let's say you decide you never want to so-called maximize the compatibility of an image. In that case, you'd want to go back to that same preference setting. So go to the Edit menu and choose Preferences. That would be Photoshop Preferences on the Mac. Then choose File Handling and change this option from Ask to Never. And then go ahead and click OK. And you won't be bothered by that message in the future. And that is how you save a layered document to the native PSD format here inside Photoshop.